Ali with Geek Inc. magazine, and we're at Hal-Con speaking with Brandon Sanderson. Brandon is probably best known for his work finishing Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series, but also for his own works including the Mistborn and Alcatraz series. You were chosen to complete Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time book. How did Mrs. Rigney go about recruiting you to finish his novel?
It's actually a cool story because a lot of people think I might have applied for this, which I didn't. I had been reading his book since I was a kid. I picked up the first one when I was 14 and been reading him ever since. So his books were really meaningful to me. And when he passed away, like many people, I wrote a short little thing on my website. It was only like 3 or 4 paragraphs, but it talked about what he'd meant to me. Well, meanwhile, before he passed away, he'd asked his wife, Harriet, to find someone to finish the series. This was a big decision for him because before he decided it wouldn't be finished. And he changed his mind and decided he asked her to find somebody. And so she considered it basically a dying request. She went hunting as soon as the funeral. She said, all right, who are we going to have to finish this, because he wanted it done. And she began looking, and someone printed out the eulogy I'd written for him and put it on her desk. She read that and said, who's this kid? She called the publisher at Tor, got a hold of my books, and started reading them. And then she called me to ask me if I'd be interested. And it's really an interesting story because I just got it as a voicemail. I woke up one morning. I kind of get up kind of late. You know, you don't be a writer to get up at 8 a.m., right? So I stumble out of my bed and, you know, I check my voicemail to see if there's anything there. And I get this voicemail message from, hello, this is Harriet Rigney, Robert Jordan's widow. I would like you to call me back. There's something I want to talk to you about. And I just about lost it. I'm like, and so I tried calling her back and I couldn't get a hold of her. And so then I talked to my editor, and I called him, he wasn't in. I called my agent, he wasn't in. So I eventually called Tor, the publisher, and said, Harriet Rigney just called me. Do you guys know what this is about? And the editor I got a hold of said, oh, yeah, it's probably what you think it is. I'll have her call you back. And I'm like, what do I think it is? I have no idea. She calls me back finally and says, well, I was wondering if you would be interested in completing the Wheel of Time. She hadn't finished reading my books at that point, and so she actually said, I want to know if you're interested before I delve into your work and decide if I want you. So I had to say kind of, yes, I would be, though I kind of stumbled and stuttered a lot. I can barely remember. My wife joked, she says, I was more nervous that day than I had been on our wedding night. She's a little bit jealous when she says that. But, you know, I had months to get ready for the wedding. This came out of nowhere. And so I then waited for a month. Waited for an entire month while Harriet read my books to decide, you know, if she wanted me or not. I went on tour during this. It was crazy. Finally, she called me back and she asked if I was still interested. Would I be willing to do it because she wanted me? I don't think I would have said yes to this for anything but the Wheel of Time that I've been following for years. It's a little bit like, imagine someone took, you know, this beautiful vase, like this Ming vase, and then they put it in a bag and smashed it with a hammer, and then they dumped out half the pieces, and then they gave you the rest and said, okay, you need to put this back together and then fill in the pieces that are missing and try and make it so no one notices that it's been broken. That's about what it's like, because he wrote a lot before he passed away. He wrote about 200 pages worth of material that got handed to me. But it's just little pieces here and there. It's not like, you know, he wrote this chunk and then stopped. He liked to jump around as he wrote. So I've got like a paragraph from this scene, and I've got like 3 paragraphs from this scene, and I've got a chapter here, but it's only, you know, halfway done, and then I've got notes for this one, and then I've got a Q&A we did with his assistant where he mentioned, oh, and this happens to this character, and all of these things, and then enormous holes as well. And so it's been a real challenge. It takes me about twice as long to write any given Wheel of Time piece as it does one of my own chapters, because there's so much to do with all of that, but also I really want to match the voices of the characters and get them right. That's been my primary goal. I didn't feel like I could imitate him exactly, and so I didn't feel like it would be appropriate to try. It would have come across as parody if I did. Instead, I wanted to get the characters right. And that's my prime goal. So I'll go read scenes he wrote from their viewpoint and things like that to just try and get the feel of them before I write a new scene. And it's a lot of work. It's a big challenge. It's wonderful to do because it's like lifting weights. You know, it makes you stronger by doing it. But boy, it's one of those things where, you know, people ask me this question, It's like going to the person who's on, you know, their 20th mile of a marathon and saying, so how does it feel right at this moment? And it feels exhausting is what it feels like, but it also feels awesome.
Well, thanks a lot. Can you tell us about another one of your projects, Leading Edge?
Leading Edge is a magazine I worked on. Not a lot of people ask about this one, so I was very curious that you did this. When I was in school, the Leading Edge was a student magazine. And I became editor of it after several years on staff, just because I wanted to feel what it was like to be in the editor's shoes. Back then I wanted to be a writer. Even from the beginning I wanted to be a writer. And I thought, you should know what the editors are doing. You should be, you know, and so I went and did this so that I could read stories by new authors, see what other new authors were doing, see what the bad ones were doing, and what the good ones were doing, and learn to sit in that seat of the editor for a while. And so that student magazine is still being run. It's a great, cool magazine. You know, it's the sort of things. It's kind of a labor of love by the students. So I love to support it. But yeah, that's what it was.
Speaking to young and aspiring authors, do you have any lessons learned from your first book, Elantris?
Yeah, to new writers, really the trick is to practice. Practice a whole bunch, because a lot of people don't understand how similar writing is to a lot of other types of art, actually. Like if you're going to learn to play piano, what you do is you sit down and practice. You just sit down and do it. And you don't, necessarily go read books on piano theory, though that can help. Listening to great pianists is going to help, but at the end of the day, you have to sit down and do it. And it's the same thing for writing. Elantris was actually my 6th novel. I wrote 6 before I published one. In fact, I was working on book number 13 when I sold number 6. So I wrote 13 unpublished novels before I sold one. I wrote 5 terrible ones before I wrote a good one. And nothing will teach you how to write better than just practicing. And so I tell new writers, don't stress. Don't worry that you have to, don't think your first book has to be awesome. Don't be afraid of sucking so much that you never start. Sit down and do it, and just get a feel for it and practice it. And after that, I can start giving you advice. I can start saying, this is how you characterize, this is how you build an exciting plot. But until you've done it yourself a little bit, it's not gonna make as much sense to you. So practice.
Well, we are a tattoo magazine, so I have to ask, do you have any tattoos?
I don't have any tattoos, but I do appreciate works of art no matter what form they're in. So if you want to know more about my books, you can go to BrandonSanderson.com, or you can follow me at Brand Sanderson, because Brandon Sanderson was too long. I do have a free book on my website called Warbreaker, Standalone Epic Fantasy. You can just download it, DRM free, and give my books a try if you're interested in reading them.
Thanks so much.
They were once known as angels from the sky and heaven.